This month we talked a lot about ripoffs, knockoffs, clones, and bootleg versions of Freddy Krueger. From Dreamstalker to Bad Dreams to Slumber Party Massacre 2, it seemed like every movie company in America wanted to cash in on that Krueger craze. But not every Nightmare on Elm Street ripoff was made with the average English-speaking Western audience in mind. In the late 80s and early 90s, these foreign films could steal or plagiarize elements from popular Western films with almost zero repercussions from the actual right holders. These clones and knockoffs were made strictly for their region and culture, and it was rare for them to have a life outside of that. Well, times have changed. We live in the day of the internet now, and even though these films are still mostly unknown to English-speaking audiences, if you know where to look, you can find them. Heck, most of them are found right here on YouTube. And these movies are where you get into the most blatant rip-off offenders. I'll briefly take a look at a few examples before I dive into the granddaddy of all Elm Street ripoffs. You don't want to miss it. Trust me, it'll blow your mind how similar this last movie is. Welcome to the HellBound Horror Show. Some foreign horror films still haven't gained traction in English-speaking countries, so finding subtitles to some of these movies has proven very difficult. Now, even though I can't understand what's being said in these movies, it doesn't mean that I can't clearly see that these are ripoffs. I'm going to take a look at a few of these movies. I won't go super in-depth because I don't know what's actually being said. However, I do want to highlight them briefly and let you know they exist. If any of these movies get an easily accessible English release, I'll do a full-on review of them in the future, but for now, let's get into it. A few days ago, we talked about Don't Panic, a Mexican Nightmare on Elm Street ripoff. While Don't Panic was made for English-speaking territories in mind, this other Mexican ripoff was not. Trampas Infernal, also known as Hell's Trap from 1989, is yet another Mexican slasher film that was heavily inspired by Freddy Krueger and the Elm Street franchise. From what I gather from watching it, two rival friend groups see a newspaper about murder. From what I've seen in descriptions of this movie, the characters believe that a bear is murdering people in the woods. The two friend groups decide to hunt down the bear and try to kill it. Well, there might not actually be a killer bear in the woods after all, but instead, a killer masked madman picks off teens in the forest. This masked madman uses a very familiar glove, but with a slight twist. Instead of just normal straight blades at the end of each finger, the killer from Hell's Trap has serrated knives. It's pretty heavy stuff, and there are some pretty good kills with it. The movie does suffer from terrible picture quality, at least in the version I found. It's hard to see in the dark, but I feel with a Blu-ray transfer, this movie would look fantastic. The film seems to lose its slasher roots a little over halfway, and things begin to escalate quickly. There's a lot of gunplay at the end of this movie, and it starts to feel a lot more like an action flick. Outside of the gloved hand, Hell's Trap has little to do with the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, but it looks like a blast, and I hope it gets an English Blu-ray release in the future. This next example hails from Russia, and it's not actually a movie. Instead, it's a TV short. Now, information on all of this is hard to come by in English, but from what I gather, this next example was just one part of a 7-part series. The series follows a little boy named Keshka and his friends as his imagination tackles many different themes. Each mini-episode focuses on a new subject matter. Well, in 1992, we got Keshka I, Freddy. Yeah, one of the episodes has the little Keshka versus Freddy Krueger. Now this is the fight every horror fan wanted to see. Jason Voorhees ain't got nothing on Keshka. The 18-minute episode starts with Keshka in school. It seems like he's being scolded by his teacher. Keshka and his friends leave the school and come across this Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4 poster. Inside of the building, they are actually playing the Dream Master on the TV screen. All the boys go inside and watch, and we actually get segments of the movie. Well, poor little Keshka falls asleep. When he wakes up, he's all alone, and the doors are locked. He has to travel down the stairs to the basement. The movie theater screen spooks him, and he has to run down to the second basement. 2 basements? Sounds like he's having a dream. A bad dream. He comes across a room with a Freddy painting, and oh wow, ripping through the art is Freddy Krueger himself. Freddy talks in English for the most part, and he's upset that the boy doesn't speak any English.
Do you speak English?
You speak
Not teacher by English. Decret тушла.
Decret. I don't understand you.
Now, I'm not sure if this is all in reference to his studies or whatnot, but whatever. We got a good old-fashioned chase scene. Obviously, Freddy looks pretty rough here, but I love it regardless. This Freddy Krueger likes to feel each blade between his fingers, and it's a very unique tick that gives this Freddy a lot of personality. Well, Keshka outsmarts Freddy by singing some hymns and then tying Freddy up.
Роботам всякие. Спокойно, спокойно.
He cuts off the finger blades and then files them down. Keshka might be the smartest Elm Street survivor. Why didn't anybody else do this? Well, Keshka wakes up with Freddy's hat in his hands, wondering if it all was just a dream. Clearly, I don't understand this movie completely, but it was a pleasant surprise to hear Freddy speaking English. It's a bit goofy of a movie, but it's a really good time. It's only 18 minutes long, so check it out if it looks like your cup of tea. Our last two films come from India. These Bollywood movies are some of our biggest offenders when it comes to plagiarism. First up is the non-translated 1989 Khooni Murda. Khooni Murda starts with a shady guy spying on this girl. He loves this girl. While watching her through her window, he kills some unexpected teens in their car. He continues stalking our lead girl until he's finally captured by police. He goes to court and is found guilty. Well, he escapes from jail and goes after the girl. He loves her, but clearly she doesn't feel the same. All of her friends capture the murderer with rope, and then they burn and kill him. Well, the guy comes back from the grave as a burned demon. Instead of a killer glove, he grows blades out of his fingertips and kills all of her friends one by one. And these kills are ripped straight from the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. We got the girl who is dreaming but is lifted in the air just like Tina from part 1. There's a phone call, and instead of Freddy Krueger's tongue coming out of one end of it, we have a snake. There's the famous bathtub scene here too. A moment where a girl is fighting the burned murderer on a bed, and she uses a pillow as a shield, which we got in part 1. There's also the bed sheets hanging a guy in a jail cell. There's the TV death in part 3 right here. And that's not the only part 3 reference either. A girl who is secretly the killer gets tongue-tied with a guy on a bed and then shoots tongues out, tying the dude to the bedpost. We also had the famous puppeteer scene here as well. The killer cuts the veins out of this poor dude and uses them as puppet strings to lead him to his doom. When the killer finally dies by some sort of shaman prayer, we get the same death of Freddy from part 3. It's super fun to see all the similar deaths, but on a cheaper budget. They had to get really creative with limited funds, but I think it's a nice little film. I'd love to see an English release of this with a cleaned up scan of the movie. Yeah, it's a total ripoff, but I think it looks like a good time. Last, but certainly not least, is the infamous Mahakaal from 1994. I've wanted to see this movie for years, and luckily enough for me, Massacre Video came out with the US Blu-ray of this movie. The film is now out of print, but this Blu-ray was a holy grail item for me. Finally, I get to see the biggest Nightmare on Elm Street ripoff offender in HD. While Khooni Murda was sort of in your face and whimsical with its approach, Mahakaal tries to be a bit more serious and brooding with its. The opening credits start with a backdrop of this giant skull with bodies tied around it. You'll notice the famous Elm Street score being used and repurposed here. It's funny how much the soundtrack legitimizes this film in my head. Just listening to it automatically takes me back to the world of Krueger, and I feel like I'm watching an unreleased sequel or remake of this movie. It's hard to describe my feelings. Obviously, it's a blatant ripoff. It's plagiarism. But in a weird way, it takes me back to when I first watched A Nightmare on Elm Street as a kid. It's almost like watching the original movie with a fresh set of eyes. It's like all of my real-life dreams of unmade Nightmare sequels swimming in my head coming to life on screen. We're only a minute in, and I am hooked. This opening is very reminiscent of Tina's first dream from the first film. A girl is walking through this industrial yet kind of organic dreamland. The clinging chains are a constant foreboding presence. Our Tina character runs into the Krueger-inspired villain with a burned face and gloved finger knives to boot. He chases her throughout the dream, playing with her every step of the way. She, of course, wakes up before he can actually kill her, and when she wakes up, she finds that her nightgown is ripped and there are cuts on her arms. We are then introduced to our Nancy character, her parents, and her love interest. Now, I'm going to refer to our lead actress as Nancy and the other girl as Tina, as those are the names that I'm most familiar with, and it's basically the roles they play. We meet all of their friends at school, and they go to the soda shop after class. One of the workers is the comic relief character. Throughout the whole movie, he's going to play many different roles and different versions of himself. He's a bit insufferable, but there is a small charm to him, I guess. He pretends to be Michael Jackson in the soda shop and even dances the Thriller. They really try to get away with everything. They want to show how much Nancy loves her boyfriend, so they sing about it. And here comes the first song and dance number. Yeah. India is a different culture and they like to have musical numbers even in their horror films. Khooni Murda also had these song and dance routines. It's a real juxtaposition from what we are used to here in the States. What's with all these Elm Street knockoffs becoming musicals? Well, Tina talks to Nancy about her dreams. That night, Nancy has a nightmare too. Her younger, dead sister comes into her room. Nancy chases after her to Mahakaal's lair. When she finally reaches her, it turns out to be Mahakaal himself. She runs away and wakes up in a panic. Since all the girls are having nightmares, all the friends decide to go on a little beach trip to get away. And here comes our second musical number. Well, when they try to go home, they realize that the car won't start, so they have to stay at a hotel overnight. We get small comic relief with the shopkeep and the clown being the same actor. Apparently, they are brothers, but from different fathers. This is a running gag throughout, and we'll meet a whole cast of characters that are related, but played by one actor. Tina has a dream that night, and ultimately meets her end. Tina's boyfriend is the prime suspect, but he runs away. Of course, Nancy's father is a police officer and he uses her to get to Tina's boyfriend. The boyfriend goes to jail, but he claims that he didn't kill Tina. In class, Nancy dreams of Tina in a body bag and follows her to Mahakaal's lair. But she doesn't meet the Krueger character right away. In a pleasant advert of expectations, Nancy finds the body bag empty. With pale, dead eyes, Tina creepily calls for her.
Anita.
Mahakaal shows up and he hunts down Nancy. Now, in A Nightmare on Elm Street, Nancy wakes up by burning her arm on a steaming hot pipe. Well, Mahakaal doesn't want to plagiarize verbatim. They want to change a word or two, so our Nancy character wakes up by burning her arm on a freezing cold pipe. Perfect! They'll never know we copied them. In all seriousness, some changes do happen from here on out. The boyfriend in jail is actually killed by snakes instead of Krueger hanging him. The father has the glove of the killer in his drawer. Then there's a brief intermission. Yeah, I guess Indian films have intermissions. Who knew? The reason that the father has a glove is because Mahakaal killed his daughter. He was unable to save her, and this is an idea that Wes Craven had originally. He wanted Krueger to have killed Nancy's older sibling when Krueger was alive, but then he realized that the reveal wouldn't make much sense since Nancy would remember if she had a sibling or not.
What gave you the right to take the law into your own hands?
Because he took it into his hands to kill our kids. Glenn, Rod, Tina. They all had a brother or sister once. You too, Nancy.
Anyways, the father ended up trying to kill Mahakaal after he couldn't save his daughter. He locked him in a coffin and buried him. Nancy's boyfriend and father go to check on that coffin, and of course, it's empty now. At one point, Mahakaal possesses our Nancy character. She goes to the boy who's been sexually harassing her all movie. She takes him home to seduce him, and BAM! We get the waterbed scene from A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master, all of a sudden. Now, I'm not complaining. I love that scene, but it just feels a little weird that that's the only part of the sequels that's really used. Mahakaal takes Nancy and hides her, and it's up to her boyfriend and family to go to his lair to put an end to him. Wow! Mahakaal borrows heavily from Elm Street. It's a complete ripoff at times, but there are some cultural differences that may have Western audiences at a loss for words. The random musical numbers and random comic relief definitely feel out of place. It's a strange watch for sure, and it's overly long, sitting at about 2 hours and 18 minutes, but I really enjoyed my time with it. Mahakaal has some awesome nightmare sequences. Yes, most of them are just rehashed versions of what we know and love, but there are some different takes on them, and I'm a fan. There's just something about this movie that makes me feel nostalgic, even though I have no past experience with it. If you are a die-hard Krueger fan and you can't get enough of them, there are plenty of bootleg versions to get your fill. I've covered these knockoffs all month, but even still, I know I'm missing a ton of movies. Maybe I'll have to do this again some year. Let me know what Elm Street ripoffs I missed in the comments down below, and I'll start writing them down for a future project. If you kept up with my Nightmare on Elm Street ripoff videos this month, thank you so much. It was a really big project with so many different examples to choose from, but hopefully you found a movie you haven't heard about before. As horror fanatics, it's all about sharing the word and sharing the love of these lesser talked about gems. And that's it for the month. Happy Halloween to everyone. Thank you so much for watching. And of course, sweet dreams, everyone. Oh, the month is over. Thank goodness. It was a lot of work, but it was definitely a dream project for sure. So if you stuck around for all of these, thank you. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It really means a lot that people are actually watching these. Really cool. Good night, everyone.